Professor Namyong Lee's Global Security Brief, Long, an analysis of 9 risk mechanisms threatening great liberal democracies such as the United States, the United Kingdom, and South Korea. Today's international order is no longer defined by ideological labels, but by the stability of institutions and the quality of execution systems. Major media outlets such as Fox News, CNN, The New York Times, and The Wall Street Journal increasingly interpret internal risks within liberal democracies not as ideological conflicts, but as recurring patterns of institutional erosion. The key issue is not who carries which label, but which behaviors weaken the core pillars of liberal democracy: rule of law, market economy, national security, and freedom of expression. First, the mechanism of constitutional order erosion, 20 points. Systematic attempts to deny or incapacitate constitutional institutions such as elections, legislatures, and the judiciary fundamentally destabilize democracy. Second, the mechanism of rule of law degradation, 15 points. Collective defiance of judicial decisions or obstruction of law enforcement through violence and intimidation destroys institutional trust. Third, the mechanism of national security breach, 15 points. Activities such as intelligence sharing with hostile actors, leakage of critical technologies, and actions undermining military or diplomatic interests directly threaten state survival. Fourth, the mechanism of external influence entanglement, 10 points. Organized links with foreign governments or entities, including the receipt of funding or directives, weaken policy autonomy. Fifth, the mechanism of information distortion and psychological warfare, 10 points. Systematic dissemination of disinformation erodes social trust and undermines the legitimacy of elections and public policy. Sixth, the mechanism of economic security degradation, 10 points. Industrial espionage, market disruption, and excessive state intervention that distorts resource allocation weaken the foundation of long-term growth. Seventh, the mechanism of social fragmentation amplification, 10 points. The deliberate escalation of regional, generational, and class conflicts destroys cooperative governance and sharply reduces policy effectiveness. Eighth, the mechanism of violence justification, 5 points. Once violence or terrorism is justified for political purposes, the fundamental rules of democratic competition collapse. Ninth, the mechanism of national identity denial, 5 points. Persistent rejection of constitutional identity and glorification of hostile systems undermine institutional cohesion. These 9 mechanisms are not tools for labeling specific groups, but function as a behavior-based risk-scoring system, out of 100 points. Scores above 80 indicate high risk, threats to national security and constitutional order. 60 to 79 indicate medium risk, tendencies toward institutional erosion. 40-59 indicate potential risk, requiring monitoring, and below 40 fall within the normal range. Crucially, even groups with the same name can receive entirely different scores depending on their behavior. Policy, academic, and religious activities are constitutionally protected. Risk scores increase only when such activities are coupled with the mechanisms outlined above. The global standard is clear. The United States and Europe maximize the protection of freedom of thought and expression while maintaining zero tolerance toward espionage, violence, terrorism, and collusion with foreign powers. This is not regulation of ideology, but regulation of behavior. A shared lesson among advanced nations is that excessive labeling and stigmatization further divide society and may even reinforce risk mechanisms. Therefore, policy must focus not on banning specific labels, but on strengthening a 3-stage system: early detection, precise response, and post-accountability. Strategically, from a federal enterprise architecture (FEA) perspective, national security, rule of law, the economy, and social integration must be managed as interconnected systems. When data-driven anomaly detection, patterns of disinformation, foreign funding flows, obstruction of law enforcement, consistency in judicial decisions, protection of key industries, and civic education for information literacy operate simultaneously, these risk mechanisms can be effectively mitigated. The success or failure of a nation depends not on ideology but on system stability. Liberal democracy can only endure upon fair rules and responsible conduct. Thank you for watching Professor Namyong Lee's Global Security Brief, Long.